Welcome to the OLV Daily Reflection for Tuesday, March 30th. The first reading for today's daily Mass comes to us from the 49th chapter of the book of the prophet Isaiah. It reads, "Hear me, O islands, listen, O distant peoples. The Lord called me from birth, from my mother's womb he gave me my name. He made of me a sharp-edged sword and concealed me in the shadow of his arm. He made me a polished arrow. In his quiver he hid me. You are my servant, he said to me, Israel, through whom I shall show my glory. Though I thought I had toiled in vain, and for nothing uselessly spent my strength, yet my reward is with the Lord, my recompense is with my God. From now the Lord has spoken, who has formed me as his servant for the womb, that Jacob may be brought back to him and Israel gathered to him. And I am made glorious in the sight of the Lord, and my God is now my strength. It is too little, he says, for you to be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob and restore the survivors of Israel. I will make of you a light to the nations, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." This passage speaks to the specific call of Isaiah to be a prophet to the people of Israel. But my prayer with this passage led me to the conclusion that these words should also have each of us thinking about our own vocations. So like Isaiah, each of us were called from our birth to a vocation that only we can fulfill. And I know this reality is hard for each of us to understand and furthermore to live out in our lives. But I sometimes used an example that our personal vocation is like parents having children. If these two individuals would never met, their children would never have came into being. So brothers and sisters, we have a vocation that God has placed in our lives, and if we don't embrace it, try to live it to the fullest, there are some things that will not be done. But we should also not be afraid of failing or believing that our sinfulness will completely corrupt our vocation. Because like Isaiah, we know that God is our strength. So if God is calling us to a vocation, he will give us the grace we need in order to fulfill it. And furthermore, the stumbles along the way, the struggles with our sinfulness, help us to be humble. And again, to recognize that it's only by God's grace, his strength, that we can fulfill our vocations. And therefore, like Isaiah, we have also been given specific gifts in order to fulfill our vocation. Because as I said, sometimes living out our vocation can feel like a heavy duty, but we have gifts. We have talents. We have blessings in our lives that help us to accomplish our vocations. So therefore, we work, we serve, we be joyful in our service of the Lord. But there's another caution. Like Isaiah, each of us have probably thought at many times throughout our lives that we're toiling in vain, that our work does not matter. And again, this is because people don't notice, or we don't get recognized, or we may feel as if people are not appreciating what we're doing. But the Lord knows our commitment to him. And this reality is to be the most important aspect of our life. Nothing else is more important. And finally, if we want to be like the prophet Isaiah, we need to be a light to others. And this is probably the hardest aspect of our vocations, because as we become a light to others, especially when we show Christ to others, they may reject us, hate us, think differently of us because of what we believe. And if this happens, brothers and sisters, we actually will be the most like the prophet Isaiah, because prophets usually suffered because of what they were asked to do by the Lord. Because, as Christ said in the gospel last week in John, some people prefer darkness instead of the light. So we can't control that. But we need to live out our faith. We need to show forth Christ's light in this world. And whatever the consequences are, we accept gladly. Because also during this Holy Week, we acknowledge that Christ suffered. So therefore, when we suffer because of Christ, we are more like him. We are more like the prophets. And therefore, our lives are not only like his, but also conformed. And this should give us strength and hope and peace. Because if we're like Christ, we are truly not far from the kingdom, and we are cooperating with his grace to the fullest. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us.